Do you believe in the paranormal? Have you seen a spook, specter, or ghost? If so, you're not alone. The people on tonight's episode have also witnessed things they can't explain. A family on a sightseeing tour of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, witnesses soldiers in action as they disappear before their eyes. A couple in an office building take an elevator to the basement and get transported into another dimension. These stories and more. Join me as we try to solve a mystery. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. 3 days of brutal combat at the height of the Civil War left 50,000 Union and Confederate casualties. Like this. The creeks literally ran red with blood. Some report that Gettysburg is still haunted by the ghosts of those cut down in battle. Author and historian Mark Nesbitt offered his theory as to why. At Gettysburg, there was so much emotional energy expended in a short period of time. From the 15-year-old kid who was scared to death that he'd never make it home, or the 40-year-old man who'd just been shot through the lungs and was dying and thinking about his family. You have to think that some of it must remain. Many of the ghostly sightings have been reported by Civil War reenactors dressed in period costumes. They restaged the battle, blow by blow. One reenactor, Ray Hawk, says he and a friend were approached by a haggard figure, too realistic to be just another reenactor. This is a photo of the man that they saw. Ray Hawk says, "I think I seen a ghost. I think this guy had original equipment on, original coat, everything. To me, points out it was original." Ray says the soldier handed them each 2 authentic-looking cartridges. When they looked up, the mysterious visitor had vanished. Live ammunition hasn't been allowed at Gettysburg for 100 years. Ray, a university expert, determined that the cartridges were genuine Civil War issue. Vintage 1863. In the summer of 1993, some friends were at Gettysburg for the battle reenactments. One evening, as they hiked along a creek called Bloody Run, they came across a man lying in the bushes. Richard Knapp described what he saw. He appeared to be a man laying there, but he wasn't solid like you and I are. I mean, he was more of a hazy mist. He was shivering because it looked like he was in a lot of pain. I couldn't go no farther. Emotionally, I broke down and cried. I was shaking. I had to actually have someone come back and lead me out of the trail. The terror of Gettysburg was not limited to the battlefield. According to Mark Nesbitt, Army surgeons, lacking medicine and proper instruments, handled most injuries with one quick treatment: amputation. Mark Nesbitt says, many of the men underwent amputations of limbs without any anesthetic whatsoever, except perhaps a shot of good old-fashioned Army whiskey. So the Civil War hospital, then, was probably as close sent into hell on earth as these Civil War soldiers would have ever gotten to. One building, Pennsylvania Hall, was a field hospital during the battle. Today, it's the offices of Gettysburg College. Some say the cries of the wounded still echo here. One night close to midnight, 2 school administrators were alone in the building. They were using the elevator when the doors suddenly opened onto a real-looking Civil War hospital. Mark Nesbitt described what the woman experienced. The stench of a hospital was all around. As they peered out on this, of course they began to panic. There was no place to go. Suddenly, one of the orderlies turned to them and looked at them beseechingly, as if he needed help with this horrible test that he was doing, or perhaps help to get out of this forced incarceration he'd been in for the last 13 decades. That night, the 2 officials told their story to a campus security officer. Tim and Lynn, chief of security at Gettysburg College, remembered the incident. I would have to say that something frightened them. I can't explain it. Although I don't believe in ghosts, I guess to a certain extent, I believe that they saw maybe what they said they saw, only because I know them as credible people. Is it possible these ghostly sightings were imagined? Or will the spirits of Gettysburg soldiers remain here forever? Our next case takes us from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, all the way to Wilmington, California, to a museum going through extensive renovations, and a Civil War colonel who refuses to leave. Could these renovations be the cause of the colonel wanting to stay? Join me and let's find out. The first shots of the Civil War were fired in South Carolina during April of 1861. Although most of the fighting over the next 4 years took place in the South, it eventually spread across the country, all the way to Wilmington, California. In 1862, a military outpost was built near the Los Angeles harbor. It was called the Drum Barracks, and was a key center for training and processing troops. Today, all that remains is a single building, which is now a museum with some very unlikely tour guides. Marge O'Brien is the museum's director and curator, and states, you can lock the rooms at night. In fact, very religiously. I check all the rooms. They're locked. The lights are off. The shades are down. And you come here at 8 in the morning, and the light in the parlor might be on. And then again, it might not be. But the shades may be up. Sometimes they're down. Marge was hired to restore the rundown building after it was declared a historic landmark. She states, it was a very dark, very sad feeling as you walked through. And it was just the kind of a building that was saying, help me. Marge, a team of craftsmen and volunteers worked for months overhauling the museum. The old building slowly came back to life in more ways than one. According to Marge, spooky occurrences became natural. She states, I'm sitting in my office and something will take my attention. Either a window will rattle, the roses will hit against the window, some of the wind possibly. But something attracts me to the fact that I should be checking something. I will walk over to the parlor. 9 chances out of 10, when I have this feeling and I open the door, more likely than not, the lights on the table are on. Most times, I will walk up the stairs and check the gun room. Very often that too has the lights on and the window blinds open, even though they have been closed and down. Because the rule here is that after every tour, you pull the shades down, turn off the lights, and lock the door. Yasmin Malari, one of the volunteers, also began to believe that the building was haunted. I put down the blinds and turned off the light, locked the door and left. Came downstairs and left the building. There was nobody around. When I looked up, I saw the blind went up really slowly. It gave the impression that someone was holding it. You know, someone was doing it. Fred Duran, an exterminator for the city of Los Angeles, became a believer during one of his regular stops at the museum. He states, to me, a ghost was like Casper the Friendly Ghost, or some movie or something. I guess one doesn't believe in them until you are really convinced. As I got into the kitchen that morning, I heard some footsteps behind me, and I thought it was the caretaker. According to Fred, a man's voice behind him said, "Eye attention." Then the man asked, "Have you seen Maria?" According to Fred, as I turned around, there was this guy there. and I thought it was kind of odd, because he was in a Civil War outfit. So as I was going out, I saw the caretaker there, and the workman also, and I just asked him. I said, "Hey, the guy that lives here takes his job seriously." And they said, "You saw the captain's ghost." Marge O'Brien says she believes Fred. She states, "If Fred said he saw it, he saw it. I have no doubts in that. Fred's a very honest man." My reaction is, I wonder why he had come now, and why to Fred. Marge asked psychic Barbara Connor to search the museum for ghosts. According to Barbara, the Drum Barracks was full of restless spirits, and she claims to have several of them in the officers' lounge. 2 were playing cards. Another stood by the window looking through the curtains. But according to Barbara, one phantom seemed more aggressive than the rest. She states, "He looked at me and he said, 'I want this chair closer to the fireplace because I'm cold.' He also said his boot is too tight for him." Marge said that information rang a bell. What was interesting in my research showed that Colonel Curtis, who was the commander here the longest, had frostbitten his left foot when he was fighting Indians up in Washington. Right around the ankle, above where the nerve endings were, there was a great deal of pain which he suffered much of his life. He would wear a boot that was a size smaller so that he could have more control of that foot as he dragged it. There's no way Barbara could have known that when she walked into the room. I had just started to uncover this research. This here is a photo of Colonel Curtis. Could this be the restless spirit still haunting the rooms and halls of what is now a museum? Barbara says that she continued to have visions upstairs, which seemed to explain some of the strange noises. I told Marge, I said, "There's a little boy here, and he's throwing the ball up against the wall." She says, "We've heard this thump, and we couldn't figure out what it is." And I said, "Well, that's it. He's throwing this ball up against the wall. If you want him to stop, just tell him to stop, and he will." At the end of the tour, Barbara said she saw the ghost of Colonel Curtis and his officers in a planning session. The colonel was standing there at the table, just like so. And when we came in, he left what he was doing and went over and started digging in a box. And he turned to me and mentally projected that he wants his award. He wants the award. He's trying to find it. And I said, "What award?" And he says, I have an award. I want my award and I want it on that wall. Marge O'Brien said she had no information about Colonel Curtis having an award or even a plaque on the wall. But I discovered later that when he left Washington, Colonel Curtis did receive an award for his work with the Indians. And possibly that could have been the plaque. Did the long-dead spirits of the Civil War still roam the Drum Barracks at this log abandoned military base? Those who experienced the hauntings believe the museum is alive with history and permanent guests. If you have stories you would like to share of the paranormal or supernatural, please call Unsolved Mysteries. And who knows, maybe your story will be the next one to be featured